Okay, let's unpack this. We're about to dive into the corporate history of a company that is, well, less a telecommunications provider and more a time traveler.
That's a really good way to put it.
We're talking about AT&T, a name that for generations was basically synonymous with the telephone itself. But its modern corporate life is this absolutely dizzying saga of divorce, consolidation, a multi-billion-dollar trip to Hollywood.
And then a fire sale to get rid of it all and go back to being a utility company. It's an incredible loop.
It is the wild ride.
It is a history defined by this dramatic corporate reversal, and that's really the fascinating core of this deep dive. I mean, imagine a single, all-powerful parent company, the original Meta Bell, getting sued by the government, broken up into 7 children.
The baby bells, right?
Exactly. And then in this truly audacious maneuver, one of those children grows up, buys the original parent, and then adopts its name.
And then spends north of $100 billion trying to become a global media giant.
Only to sell it all off, to
Yeah.
focus on being a utility again. That circular, high-stakes trajectory is precisely what we need to trace today.
Exactly. So our mission here is kind of twofold. First, to trace that wild, dizzying path of reconstitution, how the baby bells became Ma Bell 2.0.
Right, the getting the band back together phase.
Yeah, exactly. And second, we need to understand the sheer scale of its current operations, the fiber, the wireless, and then really delve into the high-stakes, headline-grabbing controversies and cyber crises that have defined the company recently.
Because operating at this scale means operating under constant scrutiny and, constant risk.
Yeah, and we've got the material for it.
We really do. We have extensive material covering every facet of AT&T's core identity, its complex history, the rationale, and the fallout from those multi-billion-dollar acquisitions, and then the sales.
Plus the heavy political involvement, deep privacy controversies, and that rash of massive data breaches that have plagued them.
Right. This is your definitive shortcut to being truly well-informed about this telecom titan and its foundational role in American infrastructure.
And just to set the stage for the scale we are dealing with right now, AT&T is currently ranked as the world's third largest telecommunications company by revenue.
That's globally.
Globally. And then domestically, they are the third largest wireless carrier in the U.S., right behind T-Mobile and Verizon.
So this is a company operating at an immense scale, and its stability directly impacts not just American communication, but, national security.
Okay, so to understand the modern AT&T, you absolutely have to understand the monolithic power of the original Bell system.
You have to go all the way back.
All the way back. The foundation starts, quite literally, with the invention of the telephone. So following Alexander Graham Bell's patenting of the device in 1875, he, along with his business partners, Thomas Watson and Gardner Green Hubbard, founded the Bell Telephone Company.
And that was in 1877. That's right. And the company immediately started moving toward consolidation. By 1881, that entity had become the American Bell Telephone Company.
But here is the critical organizational shift that really predates its full monopoly status. The American Telephone and Telegraph Company, or AT&T, was actually founded in 1885 as a dedicated subsidiary.
Subsidiary, yeah. Its whole purpose was to handle the construction and management of long-distance telephone lines. It was about connecting the local networks that American Bell was so busy building out.
So you had the local parent and the long-distance child, basically.
Exactly. And that subsidiary for long-distance service, it grew exponentially. It just showed the incredible demand for national connectivity. It grew so powerful, in fact, that in a really rare corporate maneuver in 1899, AT&T acquired the assets of its parent, American Bell Telephone Company.
So the child bought the parent, even back then.
Even back then, AT&T effectively flipped the entire corporate hierarchy, becoming the parent company of the whole vast Bell system, all the local and long-distance operations.
And that move set the stage for the monopoly era, right? The Ma Bell era.
Yes. For most of the 20th century, AT&T held a near-total government-sanctioned monopoly on phone service in the U.S. This power was formally recognized in 1913 by something called the Kingsbury Commitment.
The Kingsbury Commitment. What exactly was that?
Well, it's key because it cemented AT&T's dual status. It was a monopoly, sure, but in exchange, it agreed to be heavily regulated as a public utility.
So, we'll let you be the only game in town, but we're going to tell you how to play.
That's a perfect way to put it. It formalized the arrangement where AT&T would provide universal service across the U.S., linking up all the smaller non-Bell systems. This period of total dominance is precisely how it earned its famous nickname, Ma Belle.
Right. Viewed by the public as this stable, if maybe a little bureaucratic, provider of an essential service.
A utility, like water or electricity. This was a period of incredible technological development under one single roof. I mean, Ma Belle controlled the entire chain, the research.
Zoll Labs.
Ooh.
Legendary.
Legendary. The manufacturing, which was Western Electric, and the service provision through all the local operating companies. This monolithic structure went unchallenged for decades, and it's the company that laid the physical copper infrastructure that connected the entire continent. Hashtag BB. The breakup in the Baby Bells, 1982. So this near century of monolithic power, the entire system under one umbrella, it all came crashing down in the 1980s.
What was the trigger? Was it just that it got too big?
That was part of it, but the decline was really fueled by the rise of new communications technologies. Data networks, things that didn't fit neatly into Ma Belle's regulated, voice-centric structure.
And the legal process driving this breakup was long.
Long, torturous, and massive. We're talking about an antitrust lawsuit, United States versus Western Electric Company, an American telephone and telegraph company. That began way back in 1949.
1949, wow. So it took 33 years for the case to finally reach a resolution. Why did a decades-old case suddenly come to a head in the early 80s?
I think the timing is critical here. Because the government finally recognized that AT&T's complete control over that local loop, the last mile of copper to your house, was stifling innovation in what was becoming the computer and data age.
Right. You can't have a new computer modem company if only one company controls all the phone lines.
You can't. The courts concluded that the system was fundamentally anti-competitive. So the resulting legal outcome was the 1982 modification of final judgment, which was a landmark decree that mandated the total breakup of the Bell system.
And this was a genuine corporate earthquake.
Oh, completely. AT&T was forced to divest all of its local operating subsidiaries. They were then reorganized into 7 brand new independent companies.
And these were the regional Bell operating companies, the Baby Bells.
Universally nicknamed the Baby Bells.
Right.
Exactly. They were responsible for all the local phone service and all that copper infrastructure in their respective territories.
And one of these 7 children was Southwestern Bell Corporation, or SBC.
Right, initially headquartered in St. Louis. Meanwhile, the original AT&T Corp, Ma Belle, it remained, but it was drastically changed.
It was a shadow of its former self.
Completely. Stripped of its vast local service network and its manufacturing arm, Western Electric, it was left to focus only on long-distance services. So overnight, the former monopolist was thrown into this brutal competition with aggressive newcomers like MCI and Sprint.
A situation Ma Belle was completely ill-prepared for.
Totally. That sets up this impossible situation for the original AT&T. I mean, how long could Ma Belle, now just a diminished long-distance carrier, survive, while its 7 former local service subsidiaries controlled the actual access points, the last mile of the network?
It's like owning a highway system but having all the on-ramps owned by your competitors.
That's a perfect analogy. The writing was on the wall. Hashtag KC. The hostage takeover, 1995-2005. Not long, as it turned out. And this is where the story shifts from, dry corporate history to genuine corporate soap opera. The ultimate revenge of the subsidiary.
This is the part I find so fascinating.
It's incredible. Southwestern Bell Corporation, that's St. Louis Baby Bell, started its aggressive consolidation strategy almost immediately. It was aiming to recreate the national footprint it had lost.
And it signaled this intent by rebranding itself as SBC Communications, Inc. in 1995.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting, because SBC essentially started collecting its siblings. It was fueled by the stability and the cash flow generated by its local network monopolies.
So they were using their guaranteed local profits to go shopping.
Precisely. In 1997, they acquired fellow Baby Bell Pacific Telesis, which covered California and Nevada. 2 years later, in 1999, they bought Ameritech, which covered the crucial Midwest market, including Illinois and Ohio.
So SBC is growing enormous, building this regional superpower, while the original AT&T Corp is just, struggling?
Struggling badly in the competitive long-distance and business markets. And this role reversal culminated in this audacious maneuver on November 18, 2005. SBC Communications, the former subsidiary, one of the 7 Baby Bells, purchased its former parent, AT&T Corporation.
For a relatively modest $16 billion.
$16 billion. It was literally the child consuming its mother, completing this full reversal of corporate dominance.
And this was more than just an acquisition of assets. It was a conquest of identity, wasn't it?
Completely. The merged entity made the highly strategic choice to adopt the globally recognized name, the branding, the history, and that famous stock symbol T of AT&T Inc.
So why was that so important? Why adopt the Manabel brand, a brand they had just defeated, essentially?
Because the name AT&T carried the weight of stability, quality, and universal service. It represented infrastructure, trust, and permanence. All these associations that the aggressive, consolidating SBC wanted to inherit instantly.
So they bought the history.
They bought the history. The original AT&T Corp technically survived, but only as the long-distance subsidiary of the newly branded SBC-led AT&T Inc. The parent had been replaced by the child.
But the reassembly wasn't even finished then.
Not at all. The new AT&T Inc. acquired the last independent piece of the original structure, Bell South Corporation, in 2006.
And this was strategically crucial, right? Because of wireless.
Absolutely. It consolidated ownership of Singular Wireless, which was a joint venture that SBC and Bell South had been running. And Singular had already acquired the old AT&T Wireless back in 2004.
So it was all just folding back in on itself.
It was. Singular was then fully rebranded, finally becoming AT&T Mobility. So the summary of this incredible consolidation is that the modern AT&T is, effectively, a highly complex reconstitution of most of the Bell system.
It's wild. It includes 4 of the 7 original Baby Bell Southwestern Bell, the engine of the whole thing, Pacific Telesis, Ameritech, and Bell South, plus the remnants of the original AT&T long-distance division.
They broke up, but due to the sheer corporate gravity and the value of their local assets, they mostly got back together, just under the leadership structure and corporate culture of the Baby Bell SBC.
Okay, so once that core infrastructure was reassembled under the AT&T name, the company turned its attention to massive expansion and strategic convergence.
Right. The idea was no longer just to own the pipes, but to own everything that flowed through them: wireless, video, and ultimately media content.
And that strategy began with a major failure.
A very big, very public failure. The 2011 bid for T-Mobile, AT&T made this colossal $39 billion stock and cash offer. They recognized the massive advantage of merging their wireless spectrum holdings.
But the government did not like that.
Not at all. The bid was met with intense regulatory scrutiny and legal hurdles from the U.S. government, which argued that reducing the number of major carriers from 4 to 3 would just kill competition.
And the government forced them to withdraw the bid, and the failure cost AT&T staggering sums of money.
It was huge. As part of the original acquisition agreement, T-Mobile received $3 billion in cash just for the deal failing.
Just a breakup fee.
A $3 billion breakup fee. But perhaps more painful, T-Mobile also gained access to $1 billion worth of AT&T-held wireless spectrum.
So for those of us who aren't radio engineers, why is losing that spectrum so critical? Why did that failure set back AT&T's wireless competitiveness so much?
Well, wireless spectrum is the finite resource that allows carriers to transmit data. It's the airwaves. It's the fundamental capacity of a network. So losing $1 billion worth of spectrum meant AT&T was giving a direct competitor, T-Mobile, the very airwaves they needed to expand capacity and improve speed.
They were basically forced to help their rival get stronger.
Exactly. It was a $4 billion step back for a purchase that never even happened, and it directly handicapped AT&T's ability to build out a superior network for years.
Despite that, they continued to expand internationally. They moved aggressively into the Mexican market.
They did. They purchased the cellular carrier iUsacell in late 2014 and followed that up by purchasing NII Holdings' wireless business in early 2015. They merged those two, creating AT&T Mexico, aiming to be a major player south of the border.
But domestically, their content ambitions began in earnest in 2015.
Yes. When AT&T purchased DirecTV for $48.5 billion, the strategic rationale was pretty straightforward. Integrate a massive paid television subscriber base with their existing network services.
It was about bundling, right?
It was all about the bundle. The immediate plan was to converge their existing Uverse home internet and IPTV brands with DirecTV, calling the whole package AT&T Entertainment. This marked a clear step toward integrating distribution with infrastructure. They wanted to be the single source for everything in your home. Hashtag tag B. The great content experiment, Warner Media.
The DirecTV deal, though, That was just the warm-up act.
It really was. It was just preparation for the big bet.
Hmm.
The acquisition of Time Warner was the moment AT&T truly decided to cross the line from being a utility provider into a Hollywood titan.
I remember when this was announced, it felt huge.
It was. On October 22, 2016, AT&T announced the deal to buy Time Warner for an enormous $108.7 billion, including all the assumed debt.
$108 billion, that's a staggering number.
It's a mind-boggling number. And the intent was crystal clear. Own the ultimate high-value content, HBO, CNN, Turner Broadcasting, Warner Bros. Studios, and integrate those assets directly with their vast wireless and home internet customer base.
So the dream was vertical integration.
Total vertical integration. AT&T owned the fiber, they owned the 5G towers, and now they owned the movies and shows flowing across them.
But the regulatory battle was immediate and intense. I mean, this was arguably the biggest antitrust challenge of the modern era.
It was. The U.S. Department of Justice Antitrust Division filed a lawsuit to block the merger. They argued that combining content ownership with content distribution would, and I'm quoting here, harm competition, result in higher bills for consumers, and less innovation.
A pretty direct accusation.
Very direct. The trial was a spectacle, watched closely by every major media and tech company. In June 2018, U.S. District Court Judge Richard J. Leon ruled, crucially, that the merger could proceed without any conditions.
And the merger closed almost immediately after that.
2 days later, and Time Warner was promptly renamed Warner Media. The vision was now reality.
So following the merger, AT&T reorganized itself into 4 massive main units, which really reflected the scale of this new empire.
Right. You had communications, which is the core phone and internet services. You had Warner Media, the content engine. Then AT&T Latin America, which included Vrio video services. And then this dedicated advertising and analytics unit, which was known as Xandr.
So they had successfully built an empire spanning connectivity, creation, and advertising. It seemed like the plan was working.
It did. And of course, the launch of their major streaming platform, HBO Max, in May of 2020, that was the culmination of this strategic vision. They weren't just distributing content anymore. They were funding and launching major high-profile media products directly into the competition with Netflix and Disney. #, see the retreat, 2020-2025.
That dream of convergence, though,
Yeah.
it came with a brutal, brutal price tag.
It really did. By April 2020, the staggering debt accumulated from the DirecTV and Time Warner acquisitions resulted in a crippling debt burden north of $200 billion for the company.
$200 billion, I can't even wrap my head around that number.
It's an almost insurmountable level of liability, and it immediately signaled that a major strategic shift was absolutely necessary, and the change was swift. In July 2020, John Stankey replaced Randall L. Stevenson as CEO.
And the focus immediately pivoted.
Immediately pivoted from acquisition and expansion to cost-cutting, aggressive debt reduction, and strategic divestitures. The great content experiment, which cost over $150 billion in total, was abruptly and definitively over.
The speed of the reversal was astonishing. The media empire they had so painstakingly constructed began to unravel almost instantly.
It did. They started with smaller assets. In June 2021, they sold the mobile gaming studio Playdemic to Electronic Arts for $1.4 billion. Then they sold the popular anime streaming service Crunchyroll to Sony's Funimation for about $1.2 billion.
They moved on to shedding traditional media assets next.
Yep. They sold the celebrity and entertainment news organization TMZ to Fox Corporation for about $50 million in September 2021. Even their specialized advertising unit, Xandr, which was supposed to be the key to monetizing all their customer data, that was sold to Microsoft.
This raises a really important question. Why the fire sale? If the strategic vision was vertical integration, and they had just won this huge court battle to combine these assets, why did they turn around and sell everything off at such a rapid pace?
Well, the answer really lies in that massive debt load and the intense pressure to invest in the future of infrastructure. With $200 billion in debt, AT&T was completely hamstrung in the capital race for 5G deployment and fiber build-out.
Where Verizon and T-Mobile were investing aggressively.
Very aggressively. They realized they could not afford to be both a content creator and the country's main utility provider at the same time. The market demanded they prioritize the pipes.
And this led to the 2 biggest divestitures. The first was DirecTV.
Right. In February 2021, AT&T spun off DirecTV, Uverse TV, and DirecTV Stream into a separate entity. AT&T sold a 30% stake to a private equity firm, TPG Capital, and retained 70%.
But our sources show that the remaining 70% was eventually sold to TPG Capital on July 2, 2025.
Which essentially completes their separation from the satellite and cable TV business. But the biggest move, the real headline, was relinquishing the crown jewel, Warner Media.
This was the big one.
This was it. AT&T merged it with Discovery, Inc. to form the new entity, Warner Bros. Discovery, in April 2022. This transaction saw AT&T relinquish its equity interest entirely, divesting the company of its media arm.
It was a total, definitive strategic retreat. It proved the dream of vertical integration had failed.
Completely failed. And the symbolic outcome of this, HBO Max, the streaming platform they had championed, was immediately dropped from AT&T's unlimited plan offerings.
The company was signaling clearly to the market, we are no longer a content company. We are a connectivity company.
Exactly. We saw a massive $108 billion bet fail in spectacular fashion, forcing the company to return to its century-old roots infrastructure. So despite all those dramatic, high-flying moves into Hollywood and the streaming wars, AT&T's foundation remains its terrestrial wireline network.
The actual wires in the ground.
The actual wires. This physical infrastructure currently provides service in 22 states. And crucially, these states are not random. They are a physical reflection of the territories they acquired from the various baby bells they purchased over that 1995 to 2006 period.
So it's literally the geographic map of the reconstitution. We're talking key states across the U.S., from coast to coast: California, Texas, Illinois, Florida, Georgia.
And a large concentration across the South and Midwest. If you overlay the maps of Southwestern Bell, Pacific Telesis, Ameritech, and Bell South, you see the current footprint of AT&T wireline service.
However, this footprint is constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
Due to the broader industry trend of just shedding legacy landline operations.
Exactly. Maintaining the aging copper-based infrastructure that defines the old Bell system is incredibly expensive. So many baby Bell descendants, including Ameritech, Bell South, US West, and Verizon, have sold off or retired portions of their copper networks over the years to focus on fiber.
And we have a very specific example of this shedding process: the Connecticut landline operations.
Yes, the former Southern New England telephone territory. In December 2013, AT&T announced plans to sell that entire wireline operation to a smaller company, Frontier Communications, for about $2 billion.
And this wasn't just a sale of assets, was it?
No, the 2014 deal also included the mandatory transfer of roughly 2,500 AT&T employees and all the related buildings to Frontier. This just demonstrates the constant process of offloading legacy assets and the associated public utility obligations, the carrier of last resort commitments, to smaller operators.
So they're getting rid of the expensive old stuff and the legal requirement to maintain it.
That's the game. Hashtag B. The continuing consolidation of legacy infrastructure 2025.
Now, here's the fascinating twist that demonstrates that ongoing corporate gravity we talked about and the relentless effort to reconstitute the original Bell system, even today, nearly 4 decades after the breakup.
It's amazing, isn't it? As we mentioned, the original breakup had 7 baby Bells. The modern AT&T bought back 4 of them, plus the original Mob Bell long-distance division.
Right.
Then, in May of 2025, AT&T announced a new agreement to purchase Lumen Technologies' mass-market fiber connectivity business.
And what's significant here, what completes further reconsolidation, is that the Lumen purchase brings former Baby Bell US West's territory into the current AT&T terrestrial service footprint.
Exactly. So if this deal goes through, AT&T will effectively have reconsolidated 5 of the 7 original Baby Bell territories. It's an astonishing corporate achievement years in the making.
But the focus is clearly forward-looking, not on the past.
Absolutely. The deal explicitly excludes Lumen's vast legacy copper network, which is slated for retirement. This signals AT&T's singular, renewed focus: building out next-generation fiber infrastructure, not maintaining outdated copper lines.
So the future of AT&T is firmly rooted in being the foundational high-speed plumbing of the internet.
That's it. And that distinction, buying the fiber assets but explicitly rejecting the copper liabilities, is crucial. It shows that the company is trying to manage the public utility role without being financially burdened by obsolescence. Hashtag C. corporate geography.
Speaking of structure, the physical corporate geography of this giant company is itself a reflection of its tumultuous history as the Baby Bell SBC.
It is. The headquarters actually relocated multiple times, reflecting its growing ambition. The original Southwestern Bell Corporation moved its headquarters to San Antonio, Texas from St. Louis way back in 1992. But then in 2008, after the major acquisitions of the other Baby Bells and the original AT&T Corp., the newly branded AT&T Inc. relocated its corporate headquarters again, moving to Whitaker Tower in downtown Dallas, Texas.
And this move was rationalized as necessary to gain better access to technology partners, suppliers, innovation hubs.
All the usual corporate reasons. But even with the Dallas HQ established, the operational structure remains highly distributed, which reflects the consolidation of those massive acquired entities.
It's not all in one place.
Not at all. That distribution is a key functional detail. The Telecom Operations Group, which manages residential and regional business customers across those 22 states, is still based in San Antonio.
Okay.
AT&T Mobility's headquarters, which handles the massive wireless network, is in Atlanta, Georgia. And the Global Business Services and AT&T Labs still maintain a large presence in Bedminster, New Jersey, which was a historical core location for the original AT&T Corp.
So the physical scatter really mirrors their complicated, stitched-together origin story.
It absolutely does.
Okay, so for a company operating at this scale, controlling critical national infrastructure and possessing records on tens of millions of people, the risks are massive, both to customers and to national security.
They're huge. And the last few years, particularly 2024, have brought an almost unprecedented series of data security failures and high-profile political controversies to the surface.
This is crucial for the well-informed learner, as it really defines the modern risks associated with this telecom titan. Hashtag telecags day data security and service failures.
We have to begin with the core service failures, which are immediately disruptive. On February 22, 2024, AT&T experienced a massive nationwide cellular service disruption.
I remember this. Millions of customers were just disconnected.
And the most critical failure was that many AT&T customers couldn't even place calls to emergency services, even using the phone's SOS capability.
Which is terrifying. An outage of that scale prompted immediate investigations from the FBI and Department of Homeland Security, right? They were looking into a possible cyber attack.
They were. However, AT&T later claimed the cause was instead a non-malicious, poorly timed server update.
Which sounds plausible, but also like a convenient explanation.
It does. Regardless of the cause, the FCC opened a formal investigation into the outage, and customers were eventually compensated with a small service credit.
But beyond the outage, 2024 was defined by massive, widespread data breaches, each with different risk profiles.
Let's start with the Snowflake incident. AT&T was among several clients of the cloud storage company Snowflake Inc. that were affected by a mass breach. The exposure here was incredibly sensitive.
What kind of data are we talking about?
It included phone and text logs from a 6-month period, May 1st, 2022 to October 31st, 2022, and it affected nearly all AT&T customers.
Nearly all. Wow. And this Snowflake incident was significant not just for the scale, but because it highlighted the unique relationship AT&T has with the government.
That's right. This was reportedly the first cyber incident where the Justice Department asked a company to delay filing a disclosure with the SEC due to potential national security or public safety concerns related to the data.
And that wasn't the only nation-state level attack.
No. AT&T was reportedly affected by a separate 2024 attack linked to the Chinese government's Salt Typhoon Advanced Persistent Threat Group. This is a critical distinction. The Salt Typhoon Group was specifically targeting U.S. wiretap systems and core network infrastructure.
So their focus was intelligence gathering, not consumer fraud.
Exactly. It elevates the risk profile from a commercial failure to a national security threat.
Then came the catastrophic consumer data leaks.
Yeah. We had the confirmation of a massive March 2024 leak, which actually stemmed from a 2021 incident. This affected over 7.6 million current users and 65 million former users.
And the potential damage was enormous because the leaked records contained everything. Full names, email, mailing addresses, phone numbers, social security numbers, dates of birth, account numbers, and passcodes.
Everything you need for total identity theft. And this scale of exposure has led directly to multiple class action lawsuits.
Astonishingly, it got worse just a few months later.
It did. In July 2024, the company announced yet another breach, which they described as their largest to date, expecting to notify around 110 million affected customers.
110 million.
This relentless series of events just underscores these profound, persistent, and systemic challenges in data security and customer protection across the company's operations.
And the regulatory consequences are following these failures.
Yeah.
In September 2024, the FTC fined AT&T $13 million.
Right. The FTC found the company failed to implement adequate cybersecurity measures and delayed customer notification. And this mirrors a much earlier record $25 million fine from the FCC back in 2015 over breaches where details were stolen from call centers in Mexico, Colombia, and the Philippines.
So given the repeated catastrophic failures, from the 2015 breach to the 2024 110 million customer leak, is it fair to say AT&T has fundamentally failed to prioritize its role as a steward of consumer data?
I mean, the record certainly suggests an ongoing severe challenge. When you operate as the nation's foundational communications infrastructure, the standard for data security is incredibly high. The volume and sensitivity of the data they hold make them a primary target, and their track record indicates an inability to consistently meet that security obligation despite all these continuous public and regulatory warnings. Hashtag B surveillance, privacy, and the Hemisphere database.
The concerns about AT&T go far beyond just commercial data breaches. They touch directly on constitutional rights related to surveillance and privacy.
Right. And a key issue here is the Hemisphere database, which operates in this sort of gray area between commercial data and law enforcement access.
What is the Hemisphere database?
It's a company-maintained repository containing call detail records. So the metadata of who called whom and when for virtually all calls passing through its network dating all the way back to 1987.
Since 1987. That is a staggering amount of data. And what makes it unique is the expedited access granted to law enforcement.
That's the key. The source material notes that AT&T employees actually work directly within high-intensity drug trafficking area offices across the country to quickly turn over this metadata to law enforcement agencies via administrative subpoena.
So crucially, this often happens without the involvement of a court or a grand jury.
Right. Which accelerates the process for investigators, but raises really serious civil liberty concerns about oversight.
And this feeds directly into the larger, more famous controversy over NSA warrantless surveillance, famously encapsulated by the story of Room 641A.
The legendary Room 641A. In 2006, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, or EFF, filed the class action lawsuit Hepting v. AT&T, alleging the company allowed the NSA to monitor customer communications without warrants.
Which would be a direct violation of FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, as well as the First and Fourth Amendments.
Absolutely. And the case relied heavily on this affidavit provided by Mark Klein, a retired former AT&T technician. He alleged that a fiber optic splitter had been installed to copy all internet traffic flowing through that major San Francisco hub into a locked room.
A room that only NSA-cleared employees could access. This raised just fundamental, chilling questions about the extent of unchecked government access to private communications carried on AT&T's network.
And the subsequent legal maneuvering was intense. The U.S. Department of Justice intervened, invoking state secrets privilege to argue that allowing any legal review of the case would inherently harm national security.
So they shut it down.
They shut it down. The lawsuit was ultimately dismissed in 2009 due to retroactive legislation passed by Congress in the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which basically shielded telecom companies from liability for assisting in government surveillance.
Following these intense controversies, AT&T made a highly notable change to its public policy, subtly shifting the burden of ownership.
They did. In 2006, the company rewrote its privacy policy to state explicitly that the company, not the customer, owns the confidential information and can use it to protect its legitimate business interests, safeguard others, or respond to legal process.
Which is a pretty significant shift in framing.
It's huge. And their data retention policies are extensive. AT&T keeps records of who text messages whom and the date and time for 5 to 7 years, though not the content itself. This consistent approach has earned AT&T a low 1-star privacy rating from the EFF, reflecting deep skepticism about their commitment to customer anonymity. Hashtag deep political and ethical controversies.
Given their control over infrastructure and their heavy regulatory environment, it's probably no surprise that AT&T's political and ethical involvement is extensive. and it often leads to scandal.
They have historically been a major player in Washington, D.C., spending huge sums to influence policy. The numbers are just staggering.
How much are we talking?
From 1989 to 2019, AT&T was the 14th largest donor to U.S. federal political campaigns, contributing over $84 million.
And that was fairly balanced politically.
Reasonably. 58% went to Democrats and 42% to Republicans. But they also spent over $380 million on lobbying during that same period, focusing heavily on issues like broadband access rights and deregulation.
And one of the most scrutinized controversies involved Michael Cohen, the former lawyer for President Trump.
That's right. Reports surfaced in May 2018 that AT&T made 12 monthly payments, totaling $600,000, to Cohen's consulting firm, Essential Consultants. The payments started just 3 days after President Trump's inauguration in January 2017.
The timing is very convenient.
The timing is suspect. Internal records suggested these payments were for Cohen to provide guidance related to the pending Time Warner merger, expected tax reforms, and potential net neutrality changes.
All things the new administration would have a say in.
Exactly. While the FCC chairman later denied Cohen ever inquired about net neutrality on AT&T's behalf, the timing and the size of the payments, made just as the company needed regulatory approval, raised serious questions about influence peddling. AT&T later confirmed cooperating with the special counsel investigation regarding the payments.
Another significant political controversy revolved around media funding, directly linking their distribution business to content creation.
Yeah, an investigative report in 2021 revealed that AT&T played a crucial role in creating, funding, and sustaining the conservative-leaning One American News Network, or OAN.
And what was the extent of that relationship?
Sworn testimony from an OAN accountant indicated that a massive 90% of OAN's revenue came from AT&T. The OAN founder, Robert Herring Sr., was quoted as saying AT&T wanted a conservative network to compete with Fox News.
And there were allegations of content influence as well.
There were. Court documents showed OAN allegedly promised to cast a positive light on AT&T during newscasts. While AT&T denied these specific allegations of coordinating content, the funding link was a significant political lightning rod.
The controversies weren't limited to federal politics either. We also see clear instances of quid pro quo attempts in state politics, like the Illinois bribery case.
A very clear-cut case. In October 2022, AT&T agreed to pay a $23 million fine to resolve a federal criminal investigation in Illinois. AT&T admitted arranging payments to an ally of former Illinois House Speaker Michael J. Madigan to influence his 2017 vote on key legislation.
And that legislation was critical for AT&T's bottom line, wasn't it?
Very. It was designed to eliminate AT&T's carrier of last resort obligation for landlines, the duty to provide basic phone service to anyone who requests it, a change expected to save the company millions.
An internal email reportedly described the relationship with Madigan as the friends and family plan.
Which really highlights the intentional nature of the influence campaign and the cost savings at stake.
And moving to Wall Street ethics, AT&T also paid a $6.25 million fine to the SEC in 2022.
That was to settle a lawsuit where the SEC alleged that in 2016, AT&T executives selectively leaked key non-public financial information to Wall Street analysts. This violated the fair disclosure rule and was aimed at manipulating revenue forecasts to meet analyst expectations.
So the regulatory failures are really across multiple sectors: data privacy, political influence, and financial disclosure.
It's systemic. And finally, we have to mention internal ethical issues, which often become public crises, like the 2015 firing of President Aaron Slater over racist text messages. An African-American employee filed a $100 million defamation lawsuit against him.
And Slater later sued AT&T for wrongful termination.
He did, claiming he was a scapegoat to protect the pending DirecTV merger, arguing executives had known about the messages since 2013. AT&T, however, stood firmly by its decision to terminate him based on the egregious nature of the messages. ###D, other criticisms.
Beyond the headline-grabbing financial and political scandals, AT&T has faced other criticisms that demonstrate the inherent tension between being a major public utility and a commercial entity focused on maximizing profit.
There is a notable public controversy from back in 2007. AT&T initially changed its legal policy to allow the termination of customer service for conduct that tends to damage the name or reputation of AT&T.
Which was immediately interpreted by the public as a form of corporate censorship.
Of course. The public outcry was significant enough that the company quickly reversed the policy to explicitly support freedom of expression for its subscribers. It's a clear example of how any move by a dominant infrastructure provider is interpreted not just as a business decision, but as a public policy one.
They can't just operate in a vacuum.
Not at all. There were also long-running accusations of discrimination against local public access television channels, or PEG channels.
Public, educational, and government channels.
Exactly. Community media groups alleged that AT&T U-verse forced these channels into a complex, hidden menu system, denying them easy channel numbers, program guides, and DVR access. This, critics argued, effectively minimized the audience for non-commercial local content to favor AT&T's own commercial programming.
Looking at the financials demonstrates the raw scale of this consolidated entity, but also the extreme volatility introduced by those multi-billion-dollar swings into content and then the rapid retreat.
The revenue growth following the consolidation and acquisition strategy was enormous. I mean, AT&T saw revenue increase from $45 billion in 2001, before the SBC acquisition, to a staggering $181 billion in 2019 at the peak of the Time Warner era.
That jump is just incredible. It reflects the massive scale brought in by acquiring DirecTV and Warner Media.
It does. However, net income, the company's actual profit, has been highly volatile, which reflects the instability of the media bets and the massive costs involved.
Net income peaked at almost $30 billion in 2017.
Right, but that was largely influenced by massive tax changes and merger accounting effects. That figure then dropped significantly to under $14 billion in 2019, just before the full retreat began. The debt load just created an unstable financial foundation.
And the workforce profile also shows the impact of these massive corporate changes.
It does. The employee count surged from 190,000 in 2005 to over 300,000 immediately after the Bell South merger in 2006.
Reflecting the reconsolidation of the baby bells.
Right. Since that high point, however, the workforce has steadily decreased, down to about 247,000 employees by 2019, reflecting continuous consolidation, cost-cutting, and the streamlining required to manage that massive debt load. #B environmental goals.
Even a company defined by the physical materials of copper wire, fiber optics, and power-hungry data centers has significant environmental responsibility.
Of course. AT&T reported total CO2e emissions for 2020 at almost 5.8 million metric tons. It's a significant footprint associated with running its massive network.
But they have established science-based targets aimed at meeting global climate goals.
They have. They're tying their commitments to the broader public discussion around climate. They plan to reduce their overall emissions by 63% by 2030 using a 2015 base year, which aligns with the Paris Agreement goal to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius.
And achieving that goal requires enormous investment in energy-efficient technology across their data centers and a shift away from older, less efficient copper infrastructure.
It's an environmental challenge that's inseparable from their core business operations. #C, brand visibility, naming rights and sponsorships.
Despite the intense internal corporate drama happening behind the scenes, the debt, the sales, the breaches, AT&T maintains an enormous, high-profile public presence through naming rights and sponsorships.
Oh, they spend aggressively to keep the brand in the public eye. Their real estate footprint is instantly recognizable in many major cities.
A physical demonstration of their historical power and current reach. Key branded buildings include Whitaker Tower, their Dallas headquarters, the famous skyscraper known locally as the Batman Building in Nashville.
The AT&T Corporate Center in Chicago, major facilities like the headquarters of AT&T Mobility in Atlanta, it's everywhere.
And their venue sponsorships are just unavoidable in sports and culture.
Absolutely. You have AT&T Stadium, the massive home of the Dallas Cowboys in Arlington, Texas, Jones AT&T Stadium in Lubbock, and even the AT&T Plaza in Chicago's Millennium Park, which hosts the famous Bean sculpture.
Beyond the buildings and venues, their sponsorships span nearly every major sport.
They sponsor the NBA, WNBA College Football Playoff. They were the official sponsor for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Historically, they were deeply involved in Formula One racing, sponsoring teams like Williams, Red Bull, and Ferrari.
It's a global branding reach that far exceeds what a simple phone company typically requires. It's fascinating how a company that repeatedly fails at media still manages to dominate our visible cultural space through sheer financial sponsorship.
That visibility is strategic. By funding these massive public spectacles, they reinforce the image of stability and permanence, which really contrasts with the volatile financial and security controversies that constantly bubble up beneath the surface.
You know, what stands out to me, looking at all these sources together, is the overwhelming complexity that results when you combine foundational infrastructure, massive media investment, overwhelming debt, political spending, and persistent security issues all under one banner.
It feels like a company at war with its own scale.
It really does.
And that complexity is the central takeaway. We traced this unique corporate resurrection where the Baby Bell SBC effectively consumed and then adopted the identity of its parent, Mel Bell.
Right. And we detailed the aggressive, multi-billion-dollar swings into content, the DirecTV and Time Warner bets, followed by the rapid, massive divestitures driven by that crippling debt.
And throughout it all, we saw the persistent regulatory and security challenges that plague a company holding the literal digital keys to tens of millions of people.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The constant flux in AT&T's corporate structure demonstrates the profound difficulty of balancing foundational infrastructure provision, the fiber and wireless networks, which operate on utility-scale budgets, with the fickle, capital-intensive, and highly competitive world of content creation.
It's two different worlds. And the history of consolidation and subsequent deconsolidation illustrates the intensely difficult and ever-shifting landscape of the U.S. telecom market.
This raises an important lingering question for the future.
It does. Given AT&T's renewed strategic focus on fiber and 5G and that painful definitive exit from media, will the company's path forward finally be defined by a singular utilitarian focus on being the foundational plumbing of the internet, allowing it to achieve stability and reduce its debt load? Or will the sheer scale and complexity of its lingering legal and political legacy, combined with this ongoing inability to manage consumer data securely, continue to prevent it from achieving the kind of stability Bell once represented?
You have to consider the inherent tension when the utility provider tries to operate and consistently fails, like a dynamic global media powerhouse.
It's a question they still haven't definitively answered.